Good morning. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's Seminole County Board of County Commissioners meeting. Today is Tuesday, June 28th. The time is approximately 9:30 a.m. I'd like to call the meeting to order. If you do have any electronic devices, please put them on silent or turn them off to limit the interruptions. To do the invocation, it would be Sean Pierce from Ethnos 360 Church in Sanford. And then followed by that would be the Pledge of Allegiance from Commissioner Herr. Can we all stand, please? Pastor.
Before I pray, I just want to say it's an honor to be here. And this is a time when those little flyers that I usually get in my mailbox asking for your votes come to life. I'm sorry I don't put them on the refrigerator next to my grandkids, but you're loved, and I'm so happy to be able to pray for you this morning. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for these who are gathered in this building today. We enjoy freedom. And Lord, I was just reading this morning about what Solomon observed about people who are oppressed and they have tears and there's no one to comfort them. I pray, Lord, for those that are like in the Ukraine who are oppressed and they're hurting and they're crying, and thank you for every organization that's trying to bring them relief. Thank you for the freedom that we have enjoyed for so many years here in our country. Thank you that we even have this morning freedom of assembly. Lord, I don't know what is on the agenda today. I know that these who you have placed in positions of authority in our counties are here to hear the needs of the people. We pray, Lord, that those who present would present graciously. Help all your children to play nice in the sandbox today. I just pray, Lord, that you'll give them a really great day. And most of all, Lord, as they seek wisdom, that you would give it to them so that they could, Lord, make the decisions that are in the best interest of your people. So we commit this day to you, thanking you for who you are, thanking you for Jesus Christ, our Savior. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Pastor, we're sorry for filling your mailbox as well. I always like to remind everyone that it's because of those who have served and those who continue to serve that we have the privilege of saying, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Pastor.
And again, thank you, Pastor. Thank you, Commissioner Herr. We'll now move on to proclamations, awards, and presentation. First one will be the Veteran of the Month, presented by Commissioner Constantine. Commissioner.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and everyone. Today I have the privilege of making the motion for the proclamation of recognizing the United States Army Sergeant First Class Eddie Futcher, Jr., for his outstanding service to the United States in Seminole County. Whereas the brave men and women of our Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, Coast Guard, and Space Force demonstrate a resolute spirit and unmatched selflessness, reminding us that there are few things more American than giving of ourselves to make a difference in the lives of others. And whereas throughout our country's history, generations of service members have answered the call to leave their families, their jobs, and put their futures and even their lives on the line to valiantly defend our nation. And whereas for many service members, the sacrifices ended in permanent injury or death, yet their spirit remains in the continued preservation of our freedoms and the promise of liberty. And whereas there are more than 30,000 living veterans in Seminole County who serve our nation in times of peace and war, by their service they keep America strong. And whereas Sergeant First Class Eddie Futcher enlisted in the United States Army in 1975 and rose through the ranks to Sergeant First Class. He officially retired in June of 1999, culminating nearly 22 years of military service. And whereas Sergeant First Class Eddie Futcher served as an infantryman with service during the Vietnam War and the Gulf War eras. The highlight of his career was serving on the drill field at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, for new enlistees. He earned various medals, including the Army Commendation Medal, the Army Achievement Medal, and the Drill Sergeant Identification Badge. And whereas Sergeant First Class Eddie Futcher retired from the Army and served as a corrections officer with the John E. Poe Correction Facilities in Seminole County for 13 years. In 2011, he again retired and now works for the Sun State Security at Landmark Center 1 in security and customer service. He is very active in his church, Mount Tabor AME in Altamont Springs, where he provides transportation to the Sunday service. And whereas Sergeant First Class Eddie Futcher has brought great credit and distinction upon himself, the United States of America, the United States Army, and Seminole County. Now therefore be it proclaimed that we, the Board of County Commissioners of Seminole County, Florida, express our gratitude, admiration, and respect for Sergeant First Class Eddie Futcher for his outstanding service to the United States Army and the residents of Seminole County. Be it further proclaimed that this proclamation is presented to Sergeant First Class Eddie Futcher, along with our sincere congratulations and recognition as Seminole County's Veteran of the Month, adopted today.
Second.
The motion is second. All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion passes unanimously. Commissioner?
Mr. Futcher. Sir, come on down, please. This is your day. Thank you, sir. These pictures of you right here. We have to move that.
All right, ready? On my count, in 3, 2, 1. Thank you, guys.
Right.
Well, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody that's here, and I don't know if everybody is here for me personally, but I'm glad to be here with everybody that's here. Okay. A lot of good things that were said by the commission, the board, everybody that's here, and all the ones that came and attended. I would just like to say that this is a special, something special for me to be part of this. It's been a few years since I retired from the military, and this does bring back some memories as being recognized for doing something that you enjoy being a part of, and just bring back memories. Okay. If it seems like if you notice if I tear up anything close to that, it's not because I'm nervous or anything. It's just how good I feel about being in an environment like this, around people that really think about you, and if they happen to have anyone in the audience that's prior military, ask me, I would like to say thank you for being a part of the military, either Army, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, anything of that nature, being able to volunteer to be there if our country needed us for anything that comes up. It was a pleasure for me to be a part of it. When I first joined the military, I joined first, well, I want to say to get away from home, okay? That was part of it. I never did have the intention on doing 21 years in the military. But after a couple of years and being in a new environment around different people, a different way of life, it seemed to take part of me to want to stay and join and rejoin, and next thing I know, 21 years. You know, and I tell everybody who I'm able to meet and talk about the military, I tell them all, if I had to do it all over again, I would do it in a heartbeat with no problem at all. It was a different life. It is a different life. But it's a life that you or anyone else who make that decision can find a different part of themselves in that life. And believe it or not, it'll make you a different person whenever you get out and come back to the world that you came from. I always speak also about, for the kids that's in school, I had always preached about if that was either the 10th or 11th or maybe the 12th grade, if they would be able to have something like a basic training, not when they get out of school, when they're still in school for maybe a couple of weeks, to get a part of that. So it will help them make a decision when they do graduate from high school, that they'll have that little piece of basic training to help make a decision on learning a little bit more about themselves, how to work with others, and make them a better person, to make a better decision when they do get out of high school. Wouldn't that be great? I think it would be, and I think it would help them make a better decision when they get out of high school. The years that I spent in the military, people look at the soldier as I do. But if you happen to be married at the same time, I also look at my wife. Because there's no way that I could have made 21 years without the support of my better half. And I would like to mention that to my wife, Robin, as she stands up and waves to everybody. Knowing that I couldn't have made it without her. Now I can say also the best time that I had in the 21 years in the military was the 3 years that I spent at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, as a drill sergeant. Where else can you go where you got kids coming out of high school and decide to try the military out at that time, and you get them and you get to mold them from the beginning as coming to the military, and hopefully after basic training, our goal was at that time that my commander would tell us, he said, if you start with, whatever you start with, that's what you need to finish with for graduation. That was our goal. We didn't want to let nobody go back home at that particular time without graduating from basic training. That was our goal. And we enjoyed it. And during graduation, when we have all the family, prior soldiers, when you look at the uncles, the aunts, the grandfather, the grandmother, everybody come to graduation, and the one thing that they always say to us when they come and see them marching down the road during graduation, they'll come to me and say, "Drill Sergeant, we want to thank you very much for what you did." And we always tell them, we only continue what we're doing from what you started. So we want to make sure that we congratulated the family also along with the individual soldiers themselves. So that kind of, and that normally makes them feel well and good about themselves, as well as their son or the nephew or whoever they came to congratulate them graduating from basic training, and hopefully to continue going when it's time to re-up and extend for some more time and learn more about themselves as they go along in their life. So I'm so proud to be here today, like I was proud to be there during graduation. With my wife, the drill sergeant job is only a two-year job. Okay. Now, you can extend and do an extra year, but for that to happen, I would have to take my wife to go speak to my battalion commander to make the final decision. My wife would have to let the battalion commander know. If he asks her, he said, "Robin, it's up to you if you want Eddie to do that third year." It is demanding time being a drill sergeant during those times. Sometimes I get home at 10 o'clock at night, if I'm lucky, because I have to be back to wake all the soldiers up at 3 o'clock in the morning. That's 6 days a week for a total of almost 2 months of being a drill sergeant. So when the battalion commander asked Robin that question, she thought about it for a little bit, but I think she knew how I felt, and she told the battalion commander, yes, he can do one more year. Not one more year, one more year, okay? And I was so proud of her as she was proud of me. And that helped us stay together a little bit longer too. You know, so, and we're still together. I think we just did our 43rd year together. Yeah.
Congratulations.
And early in our life, I even got with the mother-in-law, and at times I asked my mother-in-law, what would I have to do for you to take your daughter back? And the mother-in-law said, no, she's yours now. And we've been together ever since. So, thank you, Robin, for all you do, all you did, for standing by and keeping me on track too. All right. Okay, I don't want to hold up anybody too much for your time, because I'm pretty sure you guys got a lot of stuff going on. Okay, but I want to say thank you to my other representative here, that he kind of pushed with my wife a little bit when they agreed to what's going on. But that was okay too, because 'cause we've been in the military together, so we know about these things. I want to say thank you, and I appreciate being able to come here and speak to everyone and say a little bit about the things that we did in the military, what kept us in the military, and what make us love being in the military. So I want to say thank you very much, and I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, sir. The next presentation will be presented by Commissioner Lockhart for the Parks and Committee.
All right. Commissioners, I'd like to move the following proclamation of the Seminole County Board of County Commissioners proclaiming the month of July 2022 as Park and Recreation Month in Seminole County. Whereas Parks and Recreation is an integral part of communities throughout this country, including Seminole County, and whereas Parks and Recreation promote community health and wellness, providing facilities for sports, programs, outdoor activities, and unstructured play, improving the physical and mental health of county residents. And whereas Parks and Recreation increase the community's economic prosperity through increased property values, expansion of the local tax base, increased tourism, the attraction and retention of businesses, and crime reduction. And whereas parks, trails, and natural recreation areas protect precious environmental resources and encourage environmental education in Florida's natural choice. And whereas Seminole County provides residents with over 40 parks, trailheads, and natural lands areas encompassing 7,352 acres. And whereas the U.S. House of Representatives has designated July as Park and Recreation Month, and whereas Seminole County invites residents to experience all the benefits derived from parks and recreation resources countywide, now therefore be it proclaimed that we, the Board of County Commissioners of Seminole County, Florida, do hereby proclaim the month of July 2022 as Park and Recreation Month in Seminole County, adopted this 28th day of June 2022.
Second.
A motion is second. All in favor of the motion, signal by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion passes. Would you like to present it?
I would, absolutely. Everyone that's here from Leisure Services, if you all would come down and accept this together, because
Come on down.
this is a team sport for sure. TK, if I'd known you were going to be here, I'd brought a popcorn.
Get the afternoon together, charity.
All right, everyone all set? All right, ready, on my count, in 3, 2, 1.
Do you think it has to do with,
Good, Rick.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, thank you very much for this. For the record, Rick Durr, Leisure Services Department Director. The illustrations that were up here along with us, staff did a fantastic job, and when I mean staff, I mean county staff, graphics, Ashley's crew, you name it, to try to do something for our residents during Park and Recreation Month. And the posters that you saw, hopefully you've received copies of those already. And where's Michael? Come on. So I'm going to introduce you, what's your name? Michael Worsing, Division Manager for Park and Recreation, to let folks know how they can get a copy. If they'd like any of those posters that we just picked 3 parks that mean a lot of things to a lot of different people, and our residents can get copies of these during the month of July, and Michael's going to tell you how they can do that.
Hi, thank you very much, Commissioners. Yes, we started in July. We're going to do July month, Park Month. So basically, we're going to ask the community, come out, take pictures of any one of the parks, themselves having fun, selfie, that kind of thing. They don't have to post anywhere. Come into one of the 4 locations. We basically spread them out. So we've got Sylvan Lake Park. We've got at Yarborough Nature Center, Redbug and San Lando. They come into the office, they show us 3 pictures, and we're going to give them one of the 3 different posters. They can select it. If there's mom and 2 kids, we'll give them the 3. We want to get as many of these out as possible. We're going to have them. We hope to do this every single year coming forward and just start creating a new collection. And so we're really excited about it. Hopefully people will come out. We know that people love the parks. It's just another way that we can hopefully help them be advocates for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Rick, if you could just stay there for a moment.
Sure.
I'm sure we all want to say something, but I personally want to thank not just your leadership team, but the staff in the back, as well as the staff that are in the field. We hear so many compliments about our parks, not just from our residents of Seminole County, but the surrounding counties. I can tell you this, that the times that I've actually been in the parks, hiking on the trails, I'll give you a good example, the Black Bear Wilderness Trail. I've met more people from Orange County and Lake County on that trail than I'd ever would have imagined. Everyone has such wonderful things and high accolades to say about all of you. And it's easy to sit up here to take the compliments, but to actually go out there, that you're actually the boots on the ground doing it, to say thank you is words that really don't resonate enough from the thanks that we want to give to you. So designating a month is just a drop in the bucket. Your hard work shows, and it's proof of that hard work is the compliments that we get on a routine basis by not just the Seminole County residents, but the residents around all of Central Florida. So thank you for all your hard work and dedication. Other commissioners?
Oh, I'll chime in if that's
Sure,
all
go
right.
right ahead.
So I know you all have heard the story before, but I was actually privileged enough to be a part of the Leisure Services Department as an employee many moons ago, and it was absolutely the best time of my life. Parks and Recreation will always have a special place in my heart, and just having that, I think there is an opportunity for every commissioner to spend some time embedded in each department to just really understand what it is that our team deals with, what their challenges are, and also the great opportunities that folks have in our department. So thank you all very much for the work that you do. Thank you, Rick and Michael, for your leadership. It's definitely an incredible resource that we have here in our community for everybody. And I was proud to be a part of it. TK, I remember I bought a popcorn machine because we thought it'd be fun to have popcorn, and TK became the best popcorn popper ever. And did he walk out the door already? Did he leave? Oh, there he is in the back. And he just told me that we have a snow cone machine too. He might have to come back and do snow cones. So thank you for making the job that you do for yourselves and for everyone else so much fun, because it can be fun.
Anyone else?
Sure. I have a unique opportunity to be working on a special project with the team, and the amount of professionalism that's been shown is amazing, and it hasn't come to fruition yet, but I'm extremely hopeful. And one of the things that I am most impressed about is the inclusive playground that's planned for Rolling Hills, and I know that that's not in my district, but that is a community that I lived in for many, many years, and that would have been a playground that we would have frequented many years ago. And so the ideas that you're bringing to the table are so important for the community, and I am very thankful for that.
Mr. Constantine?
And I think that what Commissioner Hurd just said means so much, is that, that just because it's not in our district doesn't mean that it isn't special to all of us, because we are elected county-wide, not district-wide. And I think that's important. And just all we had to do is go through what we've done the last 2 years to know how important natural lands, parks, recreation is to the quality of life in Seminole County. More than, 696% increase in the usage during that time. And I've heard through a number of sources that it has remained very strong and active and high, because once you are, once you have that experience, you want to have that experience again and again. So thank you for all that you do to make the quality of life of Seminole County special. I appreciate it very much.
So thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Michael. Next item on the agenda is community health presentation.
Good morning, Commissioners. Allison Thal, Community Services Director, and I am here this morning to kick off our Community Health Initiative presentation and introduce you to Kelly Welsh, our Program Manager for Community Health. This morning, we would like to share with you how we intend to spend and invest the $2 million of the American Recovery Plan Act funds that we have received back into our community to address the identified physical and mental health needs of our residents for the purpose of improving our overall health throughout our community. So, as you recall, just quickly, the Community Health Initiative was born from the key strategic priorities that were established during the strategic planning retreat, which actually occurred right around this time last year, because a staff-driven work group was actually charged with establishing an action-oriented strategic plan to include enhancing our community partnerships, leveraging existing resources, engaging stakeholders, and identifying some measurable outcomes. So with the advent of our ARPA funds, we found that our Community Health Initiative aligned directly with the Treasury's priority category of public health. We have since finalized a plan with the goal of providing access to essential care, both medical and mental health care, to our most fragile residents, coupled with educating all our residents on what resources are available and giving them the tools to access care. So I am now going to turn our presentation over to Kelly to walk you through our plan and how we got there.
Thank you. Kelly Welch with Seminole County's Community Health Initiative. I'd like to start by taking you through some of the work that we've done in the last year to lay out some of the recommendations that we're going to share with you today. Late last year, many local partners, known as the Central Florida Collaborative, completed a comprehensive review of strengths and service gaps in Central Florida. The Community Health Needs Assessment is used to drive community health improvement activities by all partners. The partners include Advent Health, Orlando Health, True Health, Aspire, the Florida Department of Health in Seminole, Orange, Osceola, and Lake counties, and a few other partners. Let's briefly talk about the Community Health Needs Assessment process itself. Interviews were held with over 100 Central Florida leaders. 30 focus groups were held with community groups such as faith-based organizations, behavioral health providers, transportation service users and providers, veterans, teachers, and many more. Community surveys were completed by over 4,200 individuals. Surveys were disseminated in 5 languages: English, Spanish, Haitian Creole, Portuguese, and Vietnamese. Numerous data sources were used to compile the most up-to-date data and statistical analysis regarding health outcomes, social determinants of health, system gaps, and system strengths and service gaps. The actual Community Health Needs Assessment document is in the final stages of completion, but we have the preliminary findings. In Seminole County, 15 priority areas were identified. Through a prioritization process, those priority areas were grouped into 5 strategic areas for action. They are streamlining access to care for all residents, enhancing mental health and substance use services in our community, refining primary care and specialized medical care to manage chronic conditions. For example, ensuring Seminole County residents have access to specialized medical services, such as screenings for cancer, which is still the leading cause of death in Seminole County. Addressing barriers to receiving care, such as transportation issues and the inability to pay for services. And finally, improving community awareness of health conditions and issues impacting our community. So where do we go from here? Through the county's Community Health Initiative, we plan to work collaboratively with our partners to address the identified needs. We are recommending 2 notices of funding availability to put money on the streets and streamline engagement with community providers. In each of the following slides, we've also included how our local efforts align with state and national initiatives. We know that in certain areas of our communities, residents are disproportionately impacted and are experiencing higher numbers of chronic illness due to food insecurity, limited access to care, and other social determinants of health, including transportation barriers. The Community Outreach and Navigation Services Initiative will fund boots on the ground, which will deploy to identified communities, engage with residents, and link them to needed services. Additionally, we will continue to work closely to support Seminole County's Fire Department's Community Paramedicine Program as they grow their program. Too many citizens cannot access quality behavioral health services due to being uninsured or underinsured. This was underscored during the COVID-19 pandemic. Through this initiative, trained mental health and substance use professionals will provide evidence-based and mobile crisis support services at no cost to the client. This will be especially important when 988 rolls out nationwide next month, as the number of crisis calls is expected to increase by at least 300%. Additionally, peer recovery specialists will help the client navigate through the complex process of recovery and provide support such as post-incarceration transitional housing support. Finally, looking forward, we must educate our community, especially our youth, about the very real dangers of illegal drug use. According to the DEA, 4 out of every 10 pills containing fentanyl has a potentially lethal dose of fentanyl. A potentially lethal dose of fentanyl is so tiny that it could fit on the tip of a sharpened pencil. Across the country, we're seeing overdose episodes in younger Americans. This final recommendation focuses on an aggressive awareness campaign to saturate our community with life-saving messaging. Through targeted campaigns such as the DEA's One Pill Can Kill initiative or the Better Without It campaign, we will educate our community, increase awareness of community resources, and save lives. At this time, we'd like to request the board approve our recommendations so that we can move forward with posting the funding opportunities and implementing the Community Health Initiative strategies. And we're happy to answer any questions you have.
Questions from the board? Commissioner Hara?
Not so much a question, but an observation. One of the things that consistently happens with regard to health improvement opportunities is the mixing up of 2 words. One is access, and so we attribute lots of things to a lack of access. And the second one that also gets left out of the conversation that I would advocate for is awareness. And I would tell you that in our county, based on my 30-some years of experience in this field, awareness is a huge gap in terms of cancer screenings. I'm getting a thumbs up from the back of the room, so I'm feeling validated, so thank you for that. We have a lot of people that are not underinsured, that are not taking advantage of programs that exist, and as you look for those applicants in the NOFA, I would tell you that awareness is as important as access, because it actually strikes a larger portion of the population.
I agree. Thank you.
Anybody else? Commissioner Lockhart?
I'll just say thank you for the incredible amount of work that you've done. This is something that we've kind of talked about in one way, shape, or form over the course of the last several years, and to see you be able to bring this together with an entire team in a collaborative way with so many different agencies is very encouraging. We have so many providers and people that want to reach out and provide services for our community, and to get them all working together, rowing in the same direction, will be a tremendous accomplishment.
Absolutely.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. At our retreat, we made this one of our top priorities. I'm glad to see that this one is coming to fruition, is starting to take shape. And I don't think there's anything more important in our community, that for the day-to-day citizen than, healthy opportunities and access, as Commissioner Herr indicates, access and awareness for them to be able to achieve the opportunity for health and community. And we do have so many remarkable assets in Seminole County to act upon and to use that it's great to see them all coming together.
Thank you.
The only excuse me, the only thing I'd like to add, you're right, health is probably the most important thing that anyone can ever focus on. If you don't have your health, that's the bottom line. Looking through the plan, there is one thing that I'd like to actually, not today, but when you put this together to try to look at it, is that I think there needs to be coordination with other agencies to reduce redundancy, but not strength. It's okay to build with another agency for a strength of a product or a strength of a moving forward, but if it doesn't provide strength, then it needs to be coordinated so we don't keep on having redundancy. That's not building that strength. That's my only issue.
Absolutely.
I didn't see that in the literature that I read.
Yeah, I've had probably 30 meetings so far since I started in mid-March with our community partners, so collaboration is the name of the game, and
Correct.
we'll continue to do that.
To reduce redundancy but not strength.
Absolutely.
And there's a difference between that. So,
Yes.
Commissioner Herr?
Just one other comment for the commissioners' information. I did ask the team to distribute the original presentation that we saw. I realized that for purposes of time management today, this was an abbreviated version. That presentation, I asked them to distribute it to our entire team at the county. That presentation was just so well done. It was amazing, so I thought it was worthy of sharing. And with that, I'm prepared to make a motion to approve as requested.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Before we call the question, Cheney, do we have any written requests to speak? Is there anyone in the audience that'd like to speak on this? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'd like to turn it over to Chief Kinley, has a brief presentation.
Seminole County Fire Department, they come when I call.
For Winter Springs resident Marilyn Logan, the Seminole County Fire Department and Community Paramedicine program is essential.
I have to have them here to help me get my husband up off the floor. He's Alzheimer's patient, and he's a faller.
30-year-old Jordan Miliacci was in a hit-and-run car accident years ago.
Are you good like that, being a little more on that side?
Now paralyzed and unable to feel anything below his armpits.
It's very difficult, but I'm getting by.
For him, the Community Paramedicine program is about basic human needs. Recently released from a hospital stay, the community paramedics worked to connect Jordan with a home healthcare nurse to keep him from future 911 calls and another hospital visit.
They've helped clean me up. They've helped adjust me into the bed. They, just provided me with whatever small needs that I needed at the time of their visit. Just checking up on me just to see if I'm okay.
Since being launched in December of 2021, the community paramedicine team has made over 450 visits to residents across the county.
On a call, you're only able to help just a short amount of time. Here, we're looking at long-term help.
The program is all about proactive instead of reactive medicine.
Trying to keep him out of the hospital. He doesn't need to be in there for simple things that could be handled on the outside by being taken care of and cleaned. There goes the infections, the bed sores, and that'll keep them out.
Programs like this is what make people like me so thankful that there's people that out there that care, that are showing that they want to help people like me. I don't get that.
When my husband falls, I go into panic mode. It scares me because my firemen know that one day they're going to pick him up and transport him for the last time. And I know that, and they know that, and they try to make my experience wonderful. So that touches my heart.
The goal of the program is to aid residents who call 911 frequently by connecting them with the right community resources. Visits can range in purpose from helping mitigate fall risks to maintaining medication usage to patient advocacy, educating and connecting patients to set them up for success.
So I go in every house and every patient to do as much as I possibly can. So when I leave, they're good. Because they might not see another person until I come back in a week or so. And I want to be able to know that I left them better than when I saw them.
For the record, Matt Kinley, Fire Chief, Seminole County Fire Department. You'd asked many months ago on an update on the community paramedicine program, and we wanted to wait until we really had some tangible results to be able to come back with you with that. That couple of minutes right there speaks for itself. Through your strategic initiatives, this is part of the community health program. Lieutenant Halcomb volunteered to spearhead this, and we went from 0 to 100 miles an hour in a very, very short period of time. Very overwhelming. There's a lot of needs out there. Some of the updated numbers, we've had 657 contacts in this short period of time. We currently have 60 people within the program where we're working to get the access to the care that they need. Some as simple as just getting them in contact with their primary provider. A lot of people they don't have the wherewithal to make that happen. Partnerships, we talked about partnerships and strengthening. If I listed all the partnerships that we have, I'd be here until noon. We are trying to make things stronger, not just avoiding that redundancy. Sustainment is a big concern for the future. That was one of the concerns on the front end. We're working with the Department of Health, the state, other funding sources to be able to pull some money in, and I'm very happy to say that we're going to be launching a beta program with one of our local hospital partners to help them keep those readmissions out and show that there is a cost savings for them, and hopefully on the back end of that, we'll start to get some other funding sources in that. When you look across the country and the communities that have successfully implemented that, that's a key part of it, is getting the hospital system involved so that they can help fund those programs. It's a win-win on both sides. You have the flyer in front of you. We have flyers out in the front. Anybody who would like to contact the Community Paramedicine Program can go to our website at seminolecountyfl.gov/paramedicine, and we'll be out there to serve.
Thank you.
Any questions for the chief? Commissioner Herr?
It's an amazing program. It's just amazing. And you have gone from 0 to 100 in a very short period of time, so congratulations on that. I would also offer that the major health insurers have a lot to gain by this program as well. And so if you want facilitation and introductions, I would be glad to help you with that. They're all on my speed dial. Their insured population, any losses goes back to the carriers. So they may be potential partners similar to the hospitals.
You'll be getting a call today. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Just thank you.
Yeah. Before we move on, anyone in the audience that'd like to speak about this issue? Seeing none. Chief, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is our investment advisor, Scott.
Good morning.
Morning.
Okay. All right, we'll try to keep this fairly short. I think the thing that's really driving the market is inflation, and it's not just, I was talking to Tim a little bit earlier, not just inflation, this time it's inflation expectations. So what's happened since the last time we were here was kind of a broad awareness that it's here and it's not reversing itself, and it's likely to be around for probably the better part of the summer, just because we spend more during the summer. I do want to mention, too, that consumer credit went up in April and in May, and the savings rate is coming down, which sort of means we're spending now, we're going to spend this summer, but we're not going to be in a good position to spend later on in the fall, which sort of folds well into this idea that a recession, a lot of people believe, will be coming. And the Fed is aware. In fact, the Fed is in the process of actually orchestrating a recession. They want demand to slow down. And they know it will naturally slow down by the end of the summer, but they can't create the impression that they're not working to slow it down anyway. So they raised rates by 75 basis points in June. That was the first time in 28 years they raised in that large an increment. The month before, they had raised by 50 basis points, and it had been 20 years since they had done 50 basis points. And the expectation is they're going to do another 75 at the end of July. The market is ahead of that already, which means things are built in. I would say the possibility of recession has increased significantly within the next 12 months. Maybe not this year. The big argument is about how deep that recession is going to be, and nobody really knows the answer to that. I would like to think, and it's probably a good time to interject this, but when you're talking about capitalism, if you believe in capitalism, the idea that there is supply that needs to be filled, companies will find a way to meet that. And, we have automation on our side this time that we might not have had 20 years ago, so I'm an optimist. Over the slightly longer term, I think the short term may get a little bit bumpy. Market yields have climbed. They climbed pretty significantly since the last time we were here. Fortunately, we were conservative in terms of what we invested last time, so we didn't put too much in at that point in time. I'm going to argue that we got a little bit longer now that yields are higher to lock some in. The housing market is correcting very, very quickly. A lot of it has to do with the fact that mortgage rates are almost double where they were when the year began. So affordability is at the lowest rate it's been in several decades. Stock market, as you know, has been wildly volatile. It's really untethered. Sometimes we'll see an economic piece of data that will come out and we'll guess what the market will do in reaction to that, and nobody really knows. And then, of course, the war in Ukraine continues to be a big wild card for inflation and growth and just about everything else. The only thing I really want to mention here on this inflation graph is that if you look at that last red bar, the expectation was not that inflation on a year-over-year basis would move higher, and it did. The thought was that it was going to trend a little bit lower, and it didn't. And that's where the inflation expectations kicked up. People were like, fool me once, fool me twice, however that expression goes, but people are expecting now that instead of it moving downward, it will move upward. I think we have a couple months of high, but I do think it'll move down. One of the reasons that expectations are moving higher is because we're seeing it now. We're seeing it at the pump, and we're seeing it at the grocery stores. So Main Street perceives inflation at the gas pump and the grocery aisles, and that is moving to all-time record highs in terms of gas prices. So our investment choices, again, the scratch out was the last time. You can look at the U.S. Treasury yields. They're significantly higher. They have been bumping all around. I believe that we probably saw the peak a couple weeks ago because things have moved downward since then. The pool rates have all moved higher. The one that's moved the highest is Florida Prime. That's where almost all of the Seminole County, Florida pool money is. And that has the lowest fee structure. That's the one that's managed by Federated. That's the one that I feel is not only the highest rate, but also the safest. And last but not least, I want to mention that the Florida banks, where for the longest time you had significant amounts of savings in your local banks, some of the banks don't want to move up and pay along the lines of what the Fed has done. One of your banks has moved up to 160. The clerk's office had pushed them to move in lockstep with the Fed. They agreed to raise their rate from 85 to 160. Which shows that 75 basis point increase. So they have the largest amount. The clerk's office also took a maturing CD and moved it over into that particular bank. So that's a good rate at 160, especially considering that's still fully liquid. So hats off to the clerk's office for pushing. Recommendations. So some of these upcoming maturities obviously have already happened. The Palm term rate came off at 10 basis points, subsequently reinvested back at 276, which is a nice step up. We also have on July 1st, which is, I guess, Friday, another Palm maturity that's coming up that will be reinvested at a significantly higher rate, I would expect. I also have a Treasury bill at the end of July that's maturing, also at a very low rate that will be reinvested. We had two investments that were made last month, about 5 weeks ago. The rates were 216 and 223, and they went out a little over a year, so we had been keeping it short. And your portfolio right now is laddered with $20 million in maturities every month going out for about 18 months. And then there's kind of a gap because we tried to keep it short. But right now with yields being significantly higher, the clerk's office and we have felt like it made sense to wait. The waiting is over. What I'm going to recommend is that we invest $40 million in treasuries and that we take advantage of the fact that we're now above 3%. and we move out a little past 2 years and start to lock in some, so that if there is a recession and the Fed stops or reverses course, then you're starting to put some 3% on. There was a fair amount of rescue funds that did come in this month, so there's still a lot of liquidity, which I'll show you in just a second. But in fact, let me skip ahead and I'll come back. I do want to show you that the yield right now is moved up to 93 on the overall portfolio through May. And with what we're proposing, the step up again is going to be significant to roughly 121, although I'm not sure how the timing is going to work out because it's a very short month. Markets close early before the 4th of July. We may or may not get those trades done to settle this week. But in the event that they did, my number crunching shows us at about 121 through the end of June. As I look forward to the end of September, I think we're going to get very close to 190. So things are positioned. It's going to take a while, but again, you have a ladder that matures. So, and I just want to show you here. This is, as you can see, and we figured this would happen. Let me mention, you're still above your benchmarks. But with the Fed moving up as quickly as they are, the portfolio is not going to be able to keep up with that big an incremental increase. So I wouldn't be surprised if you're behind the benchmark for a number of months within a couple months. So what I need is a motion to implement the purchase recommendations that I've made and for the clerk to implement your recommendations.
So moved.
We have a motion, do we have a second? Okay. Before we take the question, Mr. Malloy, you have any comments?
Thanks, Chairman. No, I think it's a good idea to start locking these in for longer terms, and agree with that. We had that meeting last Friday. I think it's the right track.
Just want to make sure. Commissioner Herr?
Just a question. I thought I heard you say that you thought that the Fed was going to move up by another 0.75 in July, but we're locking in for longer terms now as opposed to waiting the month to do that.
So it's already baked into the cake. So the market is already reflecting that. So 2 years is roughly 294. Going a little longer than 2 years, I think we can put on probably as of today, 313, 314. The overnight rate right now is actually 150 to 175. So about 160 is where it is. When the Fed moves 75 basis points at the end of July, you're going to be looking at 225 to 250 will be the range. And the pools will probably be generally close to 2-ish. So we're going to lock in out, above 3. Okay. And it's going to take a while for those overnight rates to get that high. And they may not get that high. But then the understanding is the Fed, if we hit recession, theoretically, they could start cutting again.
Yeah, I definitely understand the second half of it. Thank you for that explanation of the first half.
Shane, you have any written requests? Anyone in the audience would like to address the board on this issue? Seeing none, we'll close the public. Call the question. All in favor of the motion, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion passes. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you all very much.
Okay, we're going to go into the consent agenda. Pursuant to Florida law, the public has the right to be heard on all propositions except when the Board of County Commissioners acting in ministerial emergency matters or conducting a meeting exempt from Section 286.011 Florida statute. Public comment times on propositions is 3 minutes for individuals, 6 minutes for group representatives. The right to be heard on quasi-judicial hearings will be governed by the Florida state law. The public will be provided an opportunity to be heard on non-agenda items at the end of the meeting. And for the record, Commissioner Zimbow will not be joining us. He had a long-term family commitment that he is at, and he will be missed today. We'll now turn it over to our county manager, Mr. Applegate. Any changes to the agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have one addition. Is item 37 for the consent agenda, which is to approve and authorize the interim county manager to execute the letter of extension to the previous termination letter for Recovery House and the Recovery House lease. It's an additional 8 weeks.
Thank you. Questions or anything to be pulled? Is there a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve consent agenda items 5 through 27 and 28 and 37.
Second.
A motion, second discussion. Before we call the question, Shane, is there anyone in the audience that'd like to, no written request? Anyone in the audience that'd like to address the board? We'll close public comments, call the question. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, pose like sign. Motion passes. Thank you. We'll now move on to the next item. Which is item number 29.
Good morning. For the record, Rebecca Hammack, Development Services Director. And if it's okay, I'd like to ask your permission. Is it okay if Mary and I actually sit at the desk here, and then that way we can both
Absolutely.
engage in the discussion?
And I do realize this is a big agenda item, so it's very appropriate for your staff to be at these tables speaking to us.
Great, thanks so much. She went to go grab something, and then she'll be right back, but I'll go ahead and sit over here.
If you can start teeing it up. Rebecca, if you could introduce your team and anyone else that's worked on this, it'd be greatly appreciated.
Okay, sure. So again, Rebecca Hammack, Development Services Director, and this is Mary Moskowitz. She's the Planning and Development Division Manager. So as you know, we've been working on updates to the Land Development Code, and we did have a work session in April where we went over a complete draft of the changes. Since then, and based on that work session, there are a few issues that we needed further direction on from the board, some policy direction before we move forward with any actual text changes. And so we wanted to specifically go over those items at this meeting, and then that way we can move forward and make those changes based on your direction. So the first issue that came about from different community meetings as well as our stakeholder interviews that we had regarding the updates to the Land Development Code was a minimum size for planned developments. At the last work session, we had discussed the recommendation from our consultant, which was a minimum of 15 acres. However, there seemed to be some, I think, concern about that large of a requirement. So we went back and did some research at your request and looked at different jurisdictions and to see kind of what the proposal was within Central Florida. And I get the original recommendation for the larger size for the PD was to help meet the intent of a planned development and for proposed projects not to just use it as a way to circumvent the code or their existing zoning and land use. So we did some comparisons of other jurisdictions, as you can see here on this slide. Some of them do not have any minimum requirements. Some of the cities have very small requirements, again, because they do more infill development. And some have a minimum acreage size for a residential plan development, and then some have a minimum size for non-residential. So they differentiate between residential and non-residential. So this slide illustrates the existing situation within Seminole County regarding the planned development zoning. We have a total of 341 planned developments, and the median size is 10.06 acres, average 59.31 acres. Over 30% of the planned developments in the county are less than 5 acres in size, and over 80% of the PDs are less than 50 acres. So we do have a number of small size planned developments.
speak to.
Yeah, and this is just, as Rebecca indicated, this is just a bar graph that it shows those size, and you can see over 100 of our planned development, so, roughly a third of them are between that 0 and 5 acre size existing.
So the question is, should Seminole County establish a minimum size for PDs? And should we differentiate between residential and non-residential? Should there perhaps be a minimum size for residential plan developments versus mixed use versus a commercial or industrial plan development? It does seem to make more sense for the non-residential plan developments to perhaps have a smaller requirement for the acres. For residential, of course, a lot of times there's open space requirements, so you may need a larger acreage size. Also, what we didn't include on this, but has come up through feedback from the community after they reviewed this agenda item, was for cluster subdivisions. There are some areas within the comprehensive plan that allows you to cluster residential subdivisions but maintain your overall density, and the idea is to conserve open space. And so the community has expressed to us, and we have agreed, that it may be a good idea to require a minimum acreage size for cluster subdivisions. So that kind of gets rolled into this as well, because normally when you do a cluster subdivision, like in the East Lake Sylvan transitional area, you're required to do a planned development, and we allow 2.5 dwelling units per acre versus the 1 dwelling unit per acre that's normally allowed within the Wekiva River Protection Area. So that's usually done under a planned development, but currently there's no minimum acreage size for that, and that has come up as a concern from the community. So I guess then the two questions are, do we want to have a minimum acreage size for cluster subdivisions, and then do we want to have a minimum acreage size for planned development, both non-residential and residential?
Do you want us to answer that?
Yeah, sure. And if it's okay, if we want to...
The reason why I'm hesitant in doing that, because I'd like to also hear from the public at one point.
So I guess, do we want to address each issue as we go, or do we want to address each issue at the end?
I was going to do it at the end, if that's okay.
Okay. There's a lot. I don't.
Yeah.
There's a lot. Let's go. Can we do it as we go, since we're
We can
talking
do it-
about
we can do it a lot of different
and then
ways.
we can check the box and then move to the next
Yeah.
one?
Okay.
It's gonna be a lot.
We're going to do it as we move. So
Okay,
are
great.
we at a stopping point right now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Commissioners, Commissioner Lockhart.
So just throwing this out here, we'd had a conversation yesterday, your team, we talked about a parcel in my district that's on 1792 that's 1.4 acres, and for the possibility of them to come in and do a PD is attractive for us to be able to put requirements on that parcel that we would want, as opposed to them just zoning in the industrial zoning that they have now and moving forward. It actually would benefit the community to be able to have a PD on that 1.4 acres. So I can see us wanting to look at the East Sylvan Lake transition area and our other overlays where we have protections in mind, handling those perhaps differently. But when you're talking about the urban core, I think we might be hemming ourselves in too much with a minimum. So I, from my personal perspective, I can see us dividing the conversation a little bit into those two different categories.
Commissioner Lockhart? Commissioner Herr, I'm sorry. I was
We're
looking at
both looking at each
Lockhart,
other like-
and I was looking at Lockhart, but I was looking at...
I'll go with that. Thank you for that compliment. Just out of curiosity, 1792, what was the underlying zoning?
It's industrial.
Yes.
It's industrial.
But it is in mixed-use corridor.
Urban centers and corridor.
So just from an initial impression perspective, I can see great justification for having a different requirement for industrial commercial than you do for residential. I can also see having, and it may be the same, but cluster versus PD. And I think the next sections of this are related to, that's all going to have an impact on how this translates when we do this piece of it. I do struggle with how we got from 15 to 5, though. It's just a big jump. And so
you guys all know I'm just a pretty logical thinker. I'm not very complicated. If the median is 10 and we went from 15 to 5, why would we not go to 10?
So most of our PDs range within 0 to 5, so we thought 5 would be, I guess, practical. However, at this point, I don't know that we're necessarily recommending 5 for every situation based on, further conversation. So I do agree that we should perhaps have one, either not have any requirement like we have now, and have a requirement for the cluster subdivisions where we're trying to retain open space. And if you have a small piece of property, it's not really, realistic to really cluster and provide the needed open space. Or we have a certain amount of, or we have a minimum acreage for, residential PDs, and then we have another minimum acreage for commercial, for example, 1 acre. And a lot of jurisdictions do have the minimum of the 1 acre for planned development, for the non-residential planned developments. So even though here we're recommending 5, I don't necessarily, that's not, I don't think we're, I guess, married to that recommendation for sure.
Any other comments?
Yeah.
I just want to make sure we're done. Commissioner Herr?
I reserve the right to come back later.
Absolutely. But
No, we all.
in the past, sometimes I was accused of cutting people off. I
Yeah,
wanna make
no,
sure
we're
not
good.
doing
I'm
that.
good.
Okay, Commissioner Constantine.
I take a different perspective of this. I think that the biggest problem that we've had with PDs in the past is that it's been a, one-sided request. The PDs are there for us to be able to get things and negotiate, and for the development community to negotiate. It's been a one-sided negotiation in the past where they were getting everything that they wanted and we weren't asking for anything. So that's where I saw the problem with PDs. But, in looking at this chart that you presented to us.
Can you go back to that chart, so
the chart of the minimum size PDs, I could see the fact that we would have to do over 5 acres. Instead of 5 acres, would be over 5 acres. And I do think that a minimum size for commercial and industrial would be acceptable. Smaller category for them.
Commissioner Lockhart?
Well, I'm glad you went back to kind of how this conversation even got started. I think we saw that maybe we were not taking advantage of the opportunities that we could use PDs for, and that's kind of what started this whole ball rolling. I think we want to try to get to a place where we fix the concerns that we identified on and it was basically residential type areas that was becoming an issue. But I'm concerned that by creating a one-size-fits-all number, we could be creating another different new problem for ourselves. And I don't think any of us really intended to do that. So I do think residential and non-residential uses are different. I do think, our areas that we have identified as being special and wanting to be treated differently. We'll just keep using the East Sylvan Lake transition area as an example. There are certainly many other areas in the county that we could plug in. I think we need to be a little more strategic about identifying exactly what the end result, what's the outcome that we're trying to achieve, rather than just trying to do something that may fix one problem but create 5 more.
May I add something as well? I think all the comments are very valid. I like the idea of doing it one size does not fit all, where you have residential or non-residential. I also like the urban core area, as Commissioner Lockhart talked about. I think that is something that's unique, that we actually look at the non-urban core area as things that we may want to look at, not the core area. And I think that's appropriate. And that's exactly what I think we're hinting at, I believe.
I think I just said it.
Yeah, but I think that's what.
If I hinted, I didn't mean to hint.
Well, I mean,
meant
it's
to
not
say
the
it.
urban core area, it's the non-urban core area.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that help you out? Staff?
maybe doesn't help me out. So I'm going to ask for further clarification. Just read the room. So is what you're saying that you would look for a PD acreage requirement, residential, non-residential, in the non-urban core area and not have one in the urban core area, or have a different one in the urban core area?
At this time, I would say probably in the urban core area, because it's mostly commercial, where we want density. I would think you wouldn't have one in the urban core area. I'd like to understand how that would work.
No minimum.
Yeah.
So,
Because it's just
so
what
the
you-
urban core would continue as it is right now, and then we'd establish new regulation for the non-urban core.
It's just what Commissioner Lockhart was talking about, in her district just now, she was telling us that there is a piece of property, you said a little over an acre?
1.4.
Yeah, okay, look, 1.5 acres, that the ability to do a PD there would be advantageous for us, all of us, not just the county, but I'm talking about the residents in the area, and that's why I'm saying that.
Yeah. And that's just one example. I think just because it was fresh, we talked about it yesterday with staff, but I think there will be things like that that pop up over time, and especially when we talk about redevelopment and wanting things to improve in that urban area. It's not urban, let's be honest. We really don't have anything urban in Seminole County. But since we're calling it the urban core, we need to have a lot of flexibility to be able to even be more creative in incentivizing redevelopment in that area. So I would treat it differently.
Okay. So if I can summarize, so no minimum PD acreage requirement in the urban core, excuse me. In the suburban areas outside of the urban core, I would suggest maybe a minimum of 1 acre for non-residential. And then for residential, did we want more than 5 acres or 5 acres?
Commissioner Herr?
I'm going to tell you, I don't know the answer to that question, but I know that when we put these PDs on 5 acres, the community that results from that is typically not exactly what we want in those areas.
Cookie cutter.
And so I don't necessarily know the solution, but I do know that the current environment is not actually producing the outcome that I think the community long-term wants or deserves. So my initial instinct is to say it's got to be bigger than 5 acres. That may, however, have an outcome in planning that creates a different dynamic. As Commissioner Lockhart, I'm not trying to create a new problem. And then when you look at the next issue that you lay out, that they're interrelated, and that fixing that may solve some of this. But my instinct tells me that it needs to be bigger than 5 acres.
Okay. Yeah, and the other thing, the way we had originally written the proposed language for the minimum requirement is it wouldn't apply to any future land use designation that requires PD zoning, just in case someone does have a parcel that doesn't meet the minimum acreage requirement. They're forced to do a PD by our future land use, or by our comprehensive plan, so there should be flexibility there. And then, of course, we can bring back the cluster provision at our next work session and talk about that a little bit more in depth, because I think they're, like you said, they're interrelated but separate.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Commissioner Lockhart?
The thing where I feel like with those 5-acre PD, residential PDs, if someone has a future land use of low-density residential and they just decide to come in and develop straight zoned without any planned development, there have been unhappy neighbors because there was no requirement for a wall, because there was no and some of the things that we wind up working into the development orders and plan developments that then are no longer a tool in our toolbox when someone does come into straight zone. So I just want to be careful that we don't look at PD as enemy, straight zoning as friend, and then when the outcome of a straight zone 5-acre or 4.9-acre parcel to low-density residential, and then people are upset because they didn't get the protections that they thought they would have, or the buffers that they, because we all know LDR against LDR straight zoning, there are no buffer requirements. So right now, these 5-acre PDs, yeah, they may not be developing as we want, but at least there are buffer requirements and things that we can add in that we would not get with straight zoning. So I throw it out there just as a, let's just be careful that we don't create another issue, or that we're super, super clear with the community that's asking for that, what the end result could be.
That's an excellent point.
Rebecca, can you give us some examples, not today, but examples of just what was stated?
Sure, and just anecdotally, I can say the trend within the last several years for planned development, so the reason why we've had, I think the number of requests that we've had is the trend is to go to much smaller lots than our straight zoning districts allow. And so even though someone has low-density residential future land use and doesn't intend to exceed 4 dwelling units per acre, they request planned development because they want to develop 50-foot lots. None of our straight future or zoning districts allow a 50-foot lot. Any of the residential zoning districts that are allowed within LDR do not allow a 50-foot lot. So a lot of times developers will come in and ask for the PD for that purpose.
Well, can we go back to maybe the original statement that Commissioner Constantine was talking about? If we did that, can we put additional requirements on them?
And additional requirements
If we did allow the PD, that there'd be additional requirements for that PD?
Yes, and we have actually in the proposed
Basically,
draft language, we are adding additional language to the PD section of the code. So I guess that is actually a good point because, because we are enhancing the PD section of the code, do we in fact need to have a minimum acreage requirement?
Commissioner Constantine?
Thank you. The real, again, just to reiterate, the real problem was the fact that I felt that when PDs were coming in, it was all one-sided. By putting restrictions on them, or, putting additional requests that we're getting, more buffer, so open space, whatever, I think that does create flexibility and opportunities. I do believe, though, especially in our protected areas, that we need to have a minimum, definitely, of PDs. And I would say, as Commissioner Hurst said, over 5 acres. I'm not suggesting 10 acres, but I'm saying over 5 acres. So 5 acres or less, can't do PD. Over 5 acres, you could. And if you look at this minimum size here, and again, this does not differentiate between urban and non-urban, but if you look at it, the vast majority of them, even though the mean is 10, the vast majority, 10 acres, the vast majority of them, over 100, is under 5, or 5 and under. So if we put it over 5.
Before I get to Commissioner Hur, but one of the statements that Mr. Hammack, Ms. Rebecca was saying was that if there's additional requirements on the PD, it may negate the requirement for the...
It could.
I said it may.
Yeah, and it could, but again, I don't see them. So right now, without seeing them,
That's why I'm asking for an example.
I would love to, at the same time, I want to make sure that it's going to be hard to do, and I suggest that what Commissioner Lockhart said is true. A lot of this straight zoning is it's terrible. I mean, it's nothing more than cookie cutter. One road in, one road out, as many lots as you can possibly get, and that's not something that anybody really wants to do, especially when it's smaller than 5 acres. I'm willing to look and be flexible here. So I guess I'm not ready to say where we want, what's the sweet spot? And I think that's what we're looking for, is the sweet spot. And I'm not ready to tell you that I'm for the sweet spot. I just think that when you're getting into the protected areas as opposed to the core, there's got to be even more protection on what happens with PDs.
So what we can do is we do have another work session scheduled for August. So we could bring back the clustering, the PD section of the code, as well as this conversation, all back together at once and kind of compare them all at the same time, and then maybe that'll help frame the conversation a little bit better.
Commissioner?
I'm stuck on a couple things. One is that we had a consultant that decided on 15, so I need a better understanding as to why we would completely abandon the consultant's advice. And then secondly, this question comes from a seek to understand perspective. What is the difference between 5 and under or over 5? So 5.08 is over 5.
I was looking at them, looking at this particular chart and saying that if we did it over 5 acres, we're eliminating a number of PDs or potential PDs.
Commissioner Lockhart? Well, Commissioner Hurd ponders on that.
But it's no different than the presentation as 5. It's the same thing. It's the same outcome.
I am more concerned about, I'm more concerned about making sure that we are putting in certain protections in any size of project that we're doing with PDs. And I think we've already established that we're going to come back and put it all together, and I would be more comfortable in doing that. If we're just talking about size of PDs, absent anything else, Commissioner, I would not want to do it 5 and under, is what I'm saying.
Any discussion on this topic? Rebecca, next.
Okay.
Well, I'd rather bring the public up
Okay,
at the end.
all right. Since we're not making any final decisions today, okay, that's great.
So the next topic is open space regarding floodplains and wetlands. This was a topic that came up as part of our community meetings with the public, and there was concern from the public about the amount of floodplains and wetlands that can count towards open space. And currently, the Land Development Code allows floodplains, wetlands, and lakes together or separately be limited to 50% of total open space requirement for any development. And the public has said they believe that 50% is too high of an allowance, and they would like to see a smaller percentage. So the question is, should the percentage of floodplains and wetlands that count towards open space be reduced?
I'll chime in and say yes.
Oh, actually, I'm sorry.
Rebecca, we had a point to talk, or you want to continue?
Yes, so we did some research on this. I would just briefly mention that most other jurisdictions do allow the 50%. Volusia County does not permit wetlands to count towards open space.
Board members, Commissioner Constantine, since you started.
And since I said yes, I will expand. Wetlands are wetlands. They're extremely important to the ecosystem. And, they need other land around them to protect them, floodplains, et cetera. And so that's why I say, to me, I think we've been overly generous to the point that we are actually harming our own ecosystem by allowing that. Now, I can't speak for anyone else, but I would say that I think the Volusia County has a heck of a lot better plan than others around it. Wetlands are wetlands and shouldn't be considered as an amenity or additional open space.
Any other conversation? Commissioner Lockhart?
There are classifications of wetlands because there are different grades of wetlands. They aren't all pristine. Some of them, in fact, I'll point to the road to nowhere, as some people refer to it. I don't remember what we actually called it. That's the only name that stuck in my head over at 5 Points. That pond was a wetland that we mitigated, that we as the county went in there and decided we needed to change that up. So that wetland was not the same classification and quality as other wetlands. And so I think we do need to have there be some distinction, certainly in our conversations about that.
And I would agree with you.
Okay.
Except for the fact that a lot of those wetlands that are degraded are because of what has already happened to them, by development in the area. But I agree with you.
Well, wetlands left they eventually fill in. I don't know, wherever Kim Ornberg is, she gave me a whole class on wetlands and how they're created, and I learned a lot. She left. Yeah. She bailed. I do think there is some benefit to including wetlands and lakes in open space, certainly in communities where you can go out and walk on a boardwalk or use a boat. That's an amenity, certainly. Whether it should be 50% or not, I guess that's debatable, but I'm not sure what the number is you're proposing. Or what's the magic number, and is there a sliding scale based on the quality and how it's intended to be used? I mean, if it's just going to be there and the community itself doesn't have any access to it, then it's not an amenity. But if it's something that actually is going to increase and improve the quality of the life of the people who are living there, then, why wouldn't it be an amenity?
Commissioner?
I look at it a little bit differently, which may be erroneous, but for me, it's not about the amenity or not the amenity. It's about what buildable land is left after you do the math. And quite honestly, I'm surprised by Volusia County's number because I spend a lot of time over there and I look at what they build, and they have densities equal to ours, although they have a better buffer system. I will say that. You cannot tell the apartment complex is behind that tree buffer. So again, this going from 50 to 0 seems excessive. And I think we're going to create a different negative dynamic that we're not aware of. And then I think we're going to be put in a situation where we're making exceptions. And I just don't want to be there. So from my perspective, if we think 50 is not the right number, then we slide it. We don't move entirely to the 0 that's being discussed.
Let me just add something. I think it's also important that what is the quality of the wetlands, Rebecca? Because I think that has a lot to be a part of it. And then, is it being really truly amenitized or not? Can the public really use it? Because there are wetlands that can't be used.
Correct, and our code actually requires if you are not going to impact wetlands and mitigate for them, they're required to go into a conservation easement.
Correct.
So there are certain things you can do within those that have minimum impact, but like Commissioner Herr was saying, it's not necessarily about being amenitized, but it could just be a view shed, it could just be the preservation of open space, and not actually being able to be common usable open space.
Correct. Any other comments? Commissioner Herr?
I would tell you that the community input that I heard is that they don't want it amenitized. That
I agree.
Counting wetlands as an amenity is, well, let me say it differently. Putting an amenity in the wetland is also
bad idea.
Objectionable.
Yeah.
But we do it all the time. I mean, we, as a county, have amenitized wetlands all over the place, and we talk about how great it is because people want to come and walk through the wetlands and appreciate them and learn about them, and we've got a whole, summer camp of kids in wetlands because they're important for people to learn about and be in. Doesn't mean that you're hurting them.
Well, I think that Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Constantine?
I think there's difference between rivers, lakes, streams, and what we're talking about here is wetlands. A wetland is an ecosystem all to itself that needs to be protected. And I do agree that there are various dynamics within a wetland that some of them are not, are not as important, if you will use that word, as some others. But again, I think we're looking for the sweet spot here. And the sweet spot is that we're not, a river, lake, stream, I think, amenitized is wonderful, in opportunities for that potentially when in conservation land. Wetlands themselves need to be as much as we can left alone. So I think again, I wasn't suggesting zero. I would, because there are degrees of wetlands, but I was suggesting that, dependent upon, there could be a sliding scale, like Commissioner Delory was suggesting, based on the importance of the wetland.
Commissioner Lockhart.
So our section of the code combines them all together.
I know.
So if we're going to delineate the difference, if we want to, and I don't have a problem with that at all, treat wetlands differently and the classifications of wetlands, so we need to get them out of this code, which refers to floodplains, wetlands, and lakes together or separately.
Mm-hmm.
So if we want to talk about them separately, then they shouldn't be in the code together.
Very good point.
That's a good point.
Yeah, we would have to take the wetlands out and create a separate section for the wetlands.
And floodplains, too.
Commissioner Herr.
So when we start to talk about the importance of, I think was the word that got used, of that wetland,
There are classifications.
so classifications that are adhered to by engineering standards, environmentalist standards, so
St.
is
John
that a
Roman
whole
did
separate
what it
code we're
is.
about to write? Which one are we going to measure?
I think I wish we had,
We need our natural landscape.
Yeah, I wish we were here.
We're talking about things that we are pretending to be experts on, and we shouldn't be probably.
So I won't talk about it, but what I will say is that if we're going to go down that path of there's some sort of measurement, we have to identify the measurement standard, and we have to stick to the measurement standard. We don't want to be in the exception business.
And right now, I think
And
all
I'm
we're
seeing nods down there from county manager who's got a lot of experience in the legal department, I think.
And Mr. Chairman, I think that's all we're trying to do is just sit there and see if there's a consensus, if you will, of looking at those particular things. And my answer is yes.
You getting any clearer, Rebecca?
So is there consensus for us to create a separate requirement for wetlands and floodplains and then come back with a recommendation?
I would say yes.
Yep.
I believe there's consensus to do that.
All right, we'll move on to the next topic, separate but related.
So, no, it's, 2 slides back. Sorry. So, separate and related, we're talking about the wetlands buffers themselves, and we do have 2 criteria for the buffers. In areas that are outside the Wekiva River Protection Area and the Econ River Protection Area, we require a 15-foot minimum and 25-foot average wetland buffer. Those buffers do increase when you go to the Wekiva River Protection and Econ Protection Area to a 25-foot minimum, 50-foot average. These are hydrologically important areas, and that's why we want to maintain those buffers. As staff, though, it does literally become a calculus problem when trying to figure out what that 15-foot minimum 25% average is. And I did minor in mathematics in college, and I still have problems figuring it out. So the next slide here, we did look at other communities, and Pinellas County actually has a program where they require what they call the enhanced buffer program. So we modeled a standard for that, so you can have that 15-foot buffer setback, but that has to be enhanced. Anything that goes to between 15 and 25 feet, that would then become the standard buffer. That would then increase in the Wekiva River Protection Area to that 25% foot enhanced buffer, and then a 50-foot standard buffer. Oh, I'm sorry, so when you're between 25 and 50, you have the enhanced, and then 50 is your buffer. And then again, in the standard, 15 to 25 would be your enhanced, and then 25 would be the buffer.
Ms. Ornberg, has your ears been burning?
Thank you, Alan.
As a comment to this, Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that this is not to add any more to the calculus problem, but is to that high water mark, because rains and everything else in Florida. But I live on a lake, and I can tell you that mine varies quite a bit. My lake, given the wet season and the dry season, but on the whole, this seems to make a lot of sense. This recommendation.
Any other comments?
I agree.
Let's move forward.
Okay, perfect.
But that is the high water mark, is it?
It's
from the, sorry, go ahead.
the wetland boundary, and I'm not, so whatever that boundary is determined to be.
So the next question we have is regarding solar facilities. This is part of the new proposed code and the allowance of large-scale solar facilities as a special exception within some zoning districts. And a concern came about from the public at some of the community meetings and Planning and Zoning Commission meetings that we had regarding the proposed land development code changes regarding tree removal. So the question is, should large-scale removal of trees allow solar farms, should large-scale removal of trees to allow solar farms be discouraged or prohibited? The current proposed language says discouraged. I will point out that, of course, that would be subject to site plan approval, and currently site plans do require that you retain 25% of the existing trees that are 6-inch DBH or greater. So there is some tree preservation built into the process now.
Any comments? Commissioner Herr?
I think at this point in the development of solar, I would support us prohibiting it. I think at some time in the future, when solar is more efficient in terms of its capacity and capture rate, it's different. But right now, we're giving up a whole lot for what may happen.
To concur with Commissioner Herr,
Go right against it.
there's a lot of, empty areas of trees, absent trees, that we can put solar farms,
But this is only to take down trees.
I'm sorry?
This is to removal of trees.
I understand.
Okay.
And I think that that's the whole point. Solar farms there are a lot of areas that can be used for solar farms that are absent trees, and I don't know why we need to, encourage or, I think that prohibited right now is a good thing.
Any other direction, Commissioner Lockhart?
Do we have a definition of scale of what a solar facility is?
We do, yes.
Big fan of solar, but.
So you mean the difference, so yes, so we have the 3 different categories of solar facilities, and so depending on the acreage, and so the large-scale solar facilities would be a special exception, and right now they're only being proposed in the, as a special exception. And excuse me, I have a very tiny copy here, so.
Here's the reason for my question, and this may help clarify it a little bit. We have a situation, of course, where someone wanted to come in and retrofit an existing facility where a large-scale removal of trees took place. Would this section apply to that type of solar facility? No.
No, that would be.
So this wouldn't fix that?
Correct.
So I would like to also fix that for the future, if possible. I don't know how we go about addressing that. So this is only for large-scale solar facilities?
Yes, so it'd be like a big solar farm.
Okay.
So the example where we had the office on International Parkway, where they put up the
Canopies.
parking canopies, shades, and then put solar on top of them, that we have it in a different category in the proposed language.
Okay.
Which we would permit them based on our proposed language, but they would have to do tree replacement.
Mitigation like they do,
But it's
yeah.
at a much lesser extent than for normal development.
Okay.
Any other comments? Commissioner?
Yes, so your request was, are we going to fix that? Are we going to fix that?
It's not,
It's
so,
not a part of this.
so I guess the question is, how do we want to fix that? Do we not want to allow the retrofit to allow for solar?
I think there were other opportunities there and maybe other opportunities in other buildings. Roof was not explored. The next door retention pond area was not, there were other things, but instead we went right to trees because it was the least, it was the path of least resistance, although it didn't turn out to be for them. But if we all know when we say we discourage something or we ask someone as best as possible, or whenever we put those kinds of caveats in, we don't really have any teeth. And so I think we're going to have more of things like that where people are coming in and trying to retrofit, and with absent some good meaty requirements, they would have to explore something before taking down trees.
Yes, and we have some proposed draft language that we included, but we had just a ton to go over at the last work session. So we can provide that. If you want to take a deeper dive into the solar, we can bring that back at the next work session too, and then that way we can go through the requirements in more detail.
Rebecca, quick question for that. I know that the state has preempted us several times when it comes to solar. What have they preempted us on this?
Especially the residential,
Okay.
allowing in the residential areas.
So it's not on commercial
We
then?
can't, we can't prohibit the solar in residential areas, but we can regulate it. Like ground mounted, we can regulate in terms of setbacks and location
Okay.
on the lot. The one on International Parkway, we did look at the roof. Staff had suggested that to them, had they looked at that. Of course, they didn't want to do that because the roof was coming up for, or actually I don't think the roof was coming up for replacement for a number of years. And so they didn't want to, I guess they wanted to do it, or it was coming up soon. They didn't want to do it before they did the roof replacement because if you have to replace the roof in a short period of time, then you have to take all the solar panels off. And so there was a timing issue with the roof replacement.
I think we want flexibility to make sure that we are doing everything we can when they come in for the retrofits, that we're protecting the resource, and the resource is the trees. I think at one point, didn't they do it for underground parking, or, on the parking, they use it? So that's what we're asking for. I think I'm hearing that from everybody. That's what we're asking for.
The reality of the matter with those buildings is that it's very costly to maintain those trees out over the parking lot. So you're never going to get an ROI if you have to maintain the trees and put the solar on the roof. So unless we regulate it, it's just not going to happen.
Right. Protect the trees.
All right. Do you want to move on to the next?
Let's move on to the next.
All right, so the next topic is tree preservation of 25% of trees. Currently, our site plan regulations require that no more than 75% of the existing trees that are 6-inch DBH or larger can be removed from a site. And unless the planning division manager makes a determination that the proposed development would be severely restricted. However, we don't have a definition of severely restricted, so it's ultimately left up to this discretion of the manager, and it's subjective. We did have discussion regarding this requirement with the community, including the Development Advisory Board, and there was mention of that could be an issue on properties that have commercial, industrial, and high-intensity planned development, target industry, future land use. So this is an example of a property with non-residential future land use. It recently came through the Development Review Committee, where the trees that are located on the site are in the middle of the site where the proposed building would go. And this was, ultimately, we made a determination that the development would be severely restricted, and you would not be able to develop here because of the location of the trees. I'm sorry. So the question is, should tree preservation requirements in Chapter 40 for commercial, industrial, and HIP-TI sites be reduced or removed, or should severely restricted be defined, or should the code remain as written? Considerations: current code allows flexibility by the planning division manager. The proposed update to the arbor regulations are designed to incentivize the preservation of specimen trees and require payment into an arbor trust fund if trees cannot be replaced. And just for information, that multifamily projects that do come through for approval are done through the site plan process, so they do require that 25% tree save requirement.
So Rebecca, right there on HIP-TI, that's, in my mind, that's a special case, because you're trying to put as much development in a location to provide a specialty type of development. And they also, when they do that, they're actually putting back, if not more landscaping that is decided in their landscaping plans, correct, Rebecca?
So they would be required to submit a landscaping plan that has minimum required buffers. But in addition to that, you're normally required to do tree mitigation, tree replacement.
And it's the point I'm getting at. You can't build HIP-TI if you're going to be preserving all those trees, because then it doesn't become HIP-TI.
Yes, it could make it difficult. It could lead to site constraints, and you may not get the intensity.
I mean, I think that's a specialty case, because now they're getting an approved landscaping plan. And I don't know what everybody else feels about it.
And we also have the issue where there are some planned developments that exist in HIP-TI along International Parkway that were approved that have a certain master plan associated with them. But then when they come in to develop that master plan, they are going to have a hard time meeting that Chapter 40 requirement of the 25% tree save requirement. So that's sort of a conflict that we're...
That's the example I'm looking at right now. Commissioner Herr?
I honestly think that this is an issue because of some of the, what I would call potential indiscretions of the past. I think, and certainly along International Parkway, we all know there's apartment complexes that were put up that are just brutal to look at. And I get complaints about them still to this day. And had that not happened, the master plan across the street wouldn't be a problem. So, again, I am concerned that we're trading one problem for another problem. But I do struggle with the notion that particularly in multifamily, there is a better way to do it, and you can see it in surrounding counties, than just stripping every stinking tree out of there, zero buffer, and putting up crepe myrtle trees, because that's what it feels like to the community. And it takes years for us to overcome that view of that development. So I think it's in a buffering opportunity and not necessarily the trees that are in the middle of the property. And I do also appreciate the fact that some of these are just going to get damaged in the process. And that creates another little wiggle room opportunity because it got damaged in the process. And so we're now out managing, did it get damaged in the process? I mean, Rebecca and I have literally been on sites in boots figuring out whether stuff got damaged in the process. I don't want to be in that position with whatever code that we write.
Commissioner Herr, what I was talking about was the targeted industry for HIP-TI, not converting it to multifamily. That's not what I'm talking about. Actually providing jobs and the target industry that we want in HIP-TI. That's what I'm talking about.
So HIP-TI can't be used for multi-use?
Yes, it can, but I'm talking about...
Okay, so you got multifamily in that mix?
If you can, but I'm talking specifically if it's used for the target industry.
So are you going to do HIP TI if it's target industry versus HIP TI if the apartment complex is the first thing on the property? Is that going to be different?
You're actually converted it then to apartment complex. I'm talking about if it's remained HIP TI.
So we have parcels along International Parkway that changed their future land use designation from HIP TI to planned development and developed as 100% multifamily. But then we also have cases where you've retained the HIP TI future land use, but you're doing a mixed-use development that does include multifamily, office, hotel, other target industry uses. And a lot of times, what we have seen historically is that the residential portion will be developed first.
Any other comments? Commissioner Lockhart?
Well, I agree with HIP TI being unique. I mean, the whole concept of that is that it's high intensity,
That's my point.
right? So I think this is just, it's a clash of absolutes, right? We absolutely want to have industrial develop and use the best space and where it's appropriate. We absolutely want to have HIP TI develop, and we want to save the trees. Well, something has to give at some point in order to for the projects to be developed appropriately. I do think severely restricted should somehow be defined, not just for the sake of the development community, so that they know coming in, because this isn't just for us and the community, it's also for them. Like if we give them the rule book and we say, here are the rules we expect you to play by, and we've defined it for them, then we're all on the same page. So I think that's important. How I'll take advice from whomever on how you would actually define severely restricted, but I'm sure there are some.
Yeah, we'll have to research and see what we can come up with, and we can come back with some proposed language.
And at the same time, we need to incentivize the preservation of the trees that are, what's the phrase? The specimen trees need to be preserved as much as possible. There are creative ways to do it. I think Commissioner Hers said that multiple times. And, even when you look at like the Colonial Town Park Publix parking lot, they've got gorgeous specimen trees that were saved in the development of that shopping area. So it can be done in some ways. So we need to figure out what the magic wand is to get that to happen.
Richard Constantine?
Well, again, I think this, as it's been said already, is a cause-effect. We're just tired of seeing clear-cut properties and saying, they've got an open canvas, and now we're going to build. And all the trees were rotted, or all the trees were small, or all the trees were this, or all the trees were that, And once they're gone, they're gone. We can't do anything we can't correct it. They can say all they want about putting trees up, So I don't know. We're playing with the sweet spot here. I don't know. I think that it needs to be defined, severely restricted. And quite frankly, I think we need to try to protect at 25%. But, if it's going to severely restrict and we have a definition, I think that it can be lowered, because I agree with everybody else about what they've said with HIP TI. We're trying to get intense development there. But it needs to be defined, and we need to have a projected goal. And, I think the projected goal is good, and I think if we define severely restricted, we can work with that.
Okay.
So, I guess the only remaining question I have regarding this is for the existing plan developments that we have on the books that were approved previously, that have a certain master plan associated with them, or approved master plan. How do we, I guess, reconcile the 25% tree save requirement with what was approved previously?
I think it was already approved. I mean, I'm talking HIP TI. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
HIP TI.
Because we have proposals where the applicants are telling us they can't save any trees.
I think it has to be grandfathered. I think if we're not an organization that keeps our word, what are we? And we have to think about the future in terms of, as we're doing these, whatever, I mean, I don't think you can change course in the middle of a community's master plan.
The only thing I would add to that, though, is that if these are master plans that are, going to be, are going to expire, then I think they need to go back and go. I don't know, I don't have any specific, examples. If they are active and they're still active, and what is the time period? When do they become inactive?
8 years. So as long as their PD, the first step, the plan development order, master development plan, you have to file your final development plan and developer's commitment agreement within 5 years. And then you have to actually be under construction in 8 years.
Then we just have to be more careful when they come in the first place.
Okay, what else you got, Rebecca?
So this one came up during our public comment period. Had not been approved, but now we have Senate Bill 1339, which states that commissioners may require affordable housing in areas zoned for residential, commercial, or industrial. So the question is, right now, we do not list affordable housing as a permitted use in our commercial and industrial zonings. The question is, and other jurisdictions have done this, do we want to have affordable housing as a permitted use in our commercial and industrial zoning district?
Did you say commercial and industrial?
That, the other jurisdictions have done that. You may, or you could limit it to just one, commercial or industrial.
I know, and the reason I'm asking that question, because industrial is truly important on many levels. It's very limited in this county right now. There will be people going after all the industrial spaces that's available. Commissioner Lockhart?
I'd like to see anyone go after affordable housing anywhere in this community. I mean, frankly, we've done a lot of things to try to incentivize affordable housing, and we can't even get people to build it where it's supposed to go. So I don't know. I agree with you that we need to preserve industrial for the use of industrial, but I don't know.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I look at this differently. I see, okay, we're still going to let the industrial, but if they come in and they have industrial and they've got a unique plan that they're also going to put some housing there, I think that's where I see the flexibility.
So how do you put housing next to a scrapyard?
Well, I'm going to use it. Well, maybe not a scrapyard, but I will give you an example. I took that trip with the European Union a number of years ago in an industrial community. In Rotterdam. They had a affordable housing for employees development right next to the business. The business happened to be, a beer company, which was, I guess, wonderful for the employees, but it worked. It worked. So I'm just saying it was industrial. Their industrial zoning, and they had some affordable housing. I'm not saying that will happen here. I'm just saying, let's give it the flexibility.
Commissioner Herr?
I think that describes Hershey, Pennsylvania, but that was well thought out and all at once. I don't think that's what this says. I think this says that you could take an industrial piece of land and put a apartment complex or housing complex or any machination of that in between whatever goes next to it and whatever goes next to it, which I think will put us in a significant bind over, people are going to be in here saying, oh my gosh, don't put that next to it, depending on who comes first. And so I get the commercial piece because I think that just creates an urbanization, but I am confused about how you intermingle it into an industrial use space
that's my concern.
Nicely as well.
And another area of consideration is we do have different levels of industrial uses, so
That's
maybe it may not be appropriate in our M2, but maybe in our light industrial.
I would like to see more information.
We can certainly do that and see what other jurisdictions have done.
And if we were to implement this, a requirement, it would have to be certified affordable housing through our Community Services Department, and they would have to have a restrictive use covenant. So that way, we make sure that it's, not a market, apartment complex. So, okay.
Mr. Applegate?
Well, we were just talking, you have to be very careful, too. It's really, you could get into a lot of issues about environmental justice and if you're going to put it here and not in other places, it just opens up a lot of issues. It's not saying it can't be done, but it just has to be done very carefully.
So just to make sure we're understanding, so it sounds like the commercial, we seem to have some consensus, but we need to do some more research on the industrial zoning district.
Absolutely.
With the exception of, I want to ask interim county manager, were you referencing industrial in the comments that you just made, or both?
Industrial, that's a good point. Thank you.
And I guess I just want to say, I thought it being integrated. I understand where you're coming from, and I agree with you. That would be a problem. I'm not looking at converting it into that. I was looking at it as being integrated within the compound, if you will.
That's another option. We could allow it if it's integrated into a proposed development in light industrial.
Rebecca, what's next?
Okay. The next issue, backyard chickens. So currently, as you know, we do have a backyard chicken program that is within the County Code of Ordinances in Chapter 20, and which does allow backyard chickens with certain requirements and limitations within all of our residential zoning classifications, other than multifamily. It's in our single-family residential classifications. This table here shows you sort of the utilization of the current program. It's not widely used. We have heard just, hearsay that there are people within the county with chickens, but aren't a part of the program. We don't have a number of code enforcement complaints. Once in a while, we will get complaints, and we'll notify the people of the program. So since we are updating the land development code, and we have been directed at a previous meeting to do some updates to the backyard chicken program, we thought this might be a good opportunity to not only do those updates, but possibly move the allowance of backyard chickens as a limited use within our single-family residential zoning districts. And we can keep all of the updated requirements, since we're working on updates to the requirements, but we could keep all those requirements within the land development code. It would just become a limited use under those zoning districts, so you wouldn't formally have to go through a program. And then if we do, in fact, get a code enforcement complaint, we would still have the regulations within the land development code to enforce.
Seems reasonable. Any discussion? Okay. Thank you.
Yes, the chicken lady approves.
I don't know nothing about chickens.
The next one is yours, the dog lady.
And what we could do is work with Ashley Moore and her team to get more information out about the IFAS program, where they do the backyard chicken program, which I've heard great things about, and it is a current requirement of the backyard chicken program. So, of course, we wouldn't be able to ensure that if we move this into the land development code, we won't be able to ensure that people are actually taking the course, but I think if we put the information out there that it's available and get that sort of education out there, that people will take advantage of it.
Just no roosters.
Yeah.
Yeah, we would still keep the requirements of no roosters. We would still have a maximum number of hens. We're still working on that recommendation, though. Okay, so the next topic is, and this is something we've talked about previously at LDC work sessions, is the kennel definition. And previously, this had come up by a gentleman who lived in agriculturally zoned, on agriculturally zoned property, and he had a neighbor who was part of a rescue and had built a kennel right at the property line. And he had been complaining about the dogs barking and a lot of noise. But unfortunately, because it was on agriculturally zoned property, there was nothing that we could do since we exempt noise on any type of noise, not just farm animal noise, on agriculturally zoned property. So our current definition of kennel is a place where dogs and other small animals and house pets are kept, sheltered, boarded, bred, or groomed for compensation. Kennels are required to have special exception approval in the A1 zoning classification. However, if you are keeping a large number of animals on your property and you're not doing it for compensation, then that definition would not apply to you. The issue is that there's no limit on the number of animals being kept on residential and agriculturally zoned properties, which can result in nuisances and hoarding. So there's no connection between our definition of kennel and the number of animals being kept on a property. The proposed draft of the code defines kennel as, or commercial kennel as, any premises or structures of a business, breeder, or animal rescue organization used for housing, boarding, buying, selling, rehoming, or adopting of dogs and cats. This term will not include animal hospitals or grooming facilities unconnected with boarding. However, when we relooked at this proposed definition, we are thinking we should likely add back in the compensation, just because it will be, I think, difficult to maybe differentiate between these different types of uses, as well as we do not have a limit on the number of animals in the county. Actually, Shani, can you go to the next slide? So, as part of this conversation, some of the considerations are, there is a proposed limit. The board did adopt a limit recently. However, if you exceed that limit, you can get the non-commercial kennel license from the county, which isn't really a license, but excuse me. It requires you then to get an annual inspection, like a well check for the animals that you have on site. And so animal control would go out once a year and just make sure that, they're being kept in good conditions. So, but of course, that is not a business license. It's not, doesn't signify, zoning compliance. And so the question is, do we want to set a threshold in residential zoning classifications and in agricultural zoning classifications, where you go from being, I guess, complementary accessory or use to a residential home versus a commercial kennel. So the question is, does the board wish to retain the word compensation in the definition and/or revise the definition of a kennel in the Land Development Code to include a threshold number of animals in the definition of commercial kennel?
Okay.
And I know this opens up a can of worms.
Commissioner Herr.
It definitely opens up a can of worms. So I struggle with the notion that we keep the word compensation in there, because I think rescue organizations would argue that what they're getting is not compensation. It's a donation. Even though I have quite a few rescues and have rescued quite a few over the years, and the numbers are big. I mean, you don't rescue a dog inexpensively. And so I think we're going to get into a debate as to whether or not it's compensation or not. So I would not put the word back in there, and I am in favor of limiting the numbers of animals generally under the control of one or a small number of humans, particularly in residential. And quite honestly, I would include agricultural in that.
Commissioner Constantine.
We use the word agricultural, but a lot of our land is zoned agricultural only because it's land developed. When we get, comp land, it will be something else, single family. Would that make a difference here if we changed it to comp plan as opposed to zoning? Because, there's a lot of land that, again, I don't want to repeat myself, but there's a lot of land that's zoned agricultural that it's just a holding thing. So if we change that to the comp plan, would that make a difference?
No, it's based on Florida statutes, and because it has the agricultural zoning.
Thank you. That's why I wanted to ask. The second question I had is, you go apartment condominiums, still, A lot of cats, or a lot of dogs in a apartment condominium. But then you go to 1 acre parcels. Okay, what happens to people like me that live in a single-family house but are less than 1 acre parcels?
It's up to 1 acre.
So, and I apologize, I should have pointed this out. These are
Okay, it says 1 acre
proposed
parcel, I'm sorry.
changes to thresholds that will be discussed with the Animal Control Board. I think these was with the recommendations of the Animal Control Board, so I don't know, Alan.
So
you
it's
wanna
up
speak?
to 1 acre, it's not just 1 acre parcel and above?
Yeah, Alan Harris, Chief Administrator for the Office of Emergency Management. These are the proposed, based on what was discussed at the last commission meeting when we changed the county code 20 animals and fowl. These are the proposed changes that will come to you at a future meeting, but unfortunately, it just didn't coincide with this discussion. So you're seeing something that will potentially come to you, will come to you very soon. So, but we did need to have this definition fine-tuned before we brought it to you, so this is good discussion. But yes, it would be up to 1 acre, and then 1 acre and over would be what you all approved, actually.
I'm fine with this. Any other discussion?
So the question that staff was seeking an answer to is, based on these proposed thresholds by the Animal Control Board, do we want to establish those as the threshold to say, if you exceed these thresholds, then you are a commercial kennel, and you may not be permitted within a certain zoning district, or you may be a special exception within a zoning district? So if we were to do that, then you may have somebody who is a rescue and has a number of foster dogs within their home, and then if they exceed that threshold, then it would not be a permitted use because they would need to be a commercial kennel.
Yeah.
I'd like to reserve the fact to think about this for a little bit. That part when you're actually fostering animals is the issue in my mind. Commissioner Herr?
So is there not opportunity to write fostering into the mix?
That was a thought that came up during the discussion, because I thought, well, if we establish the thresholds, and then possibly if somebody is a legitimate foster rescue organization, that they could apply for the non-commercial kennel license from Animal Services to exceed that threshold, and they wouldn't have to be a commercial kennel, but they would be recognized separately. But I don't know if that brings up any kind of legal issues, because someone might say, well, you know, why can the rescue organization have 10 dogs, but I can only have 5?
So, and that's the non-commercial kennel fits into this. So it's as I see it, it's a step process. Non-commercial kennel, there's no limit. It just requires a once-a-year announced check, which still bothers the daylights out of me, because you can clean up the stuff. I know Alan's nodding his head back there, because I'm going to harp on this until the day I die. But if you call them ahead of time, they clean it up, so there's no, it all looks good. And then the other 364 days a year, these animals live in misery. It's not cool. So this, doing what you guys are saying, I don't think we want to do, just puts them back into the non-commercial kennel. It doesn't preclude somebody from fostering. It just puts them back into the non-commercial kennel where we do announced visits. Do I misunderstand it?
No, and that was my discussion with Alan, is because if we don't have a threshold, well, they establish a threshold, but you can exceed that threshold as long as you apply for the license, for lack of a better word, and have your annual inspection.
Yep. Announced inspection.
Commissioner Lockhart?
So really fascinating. I didn't realize that it had to be an announced inspection, because in the backyard chicken program, it's unannounced.
So maybe there's an opportunity there.
That just like.
Alan's running.
Yeah.
Some of these parcels are locked, and the individual has to actually come back, like rescues and things like that. So that is why we make an appointment with them to come by. When we do get complaints, we don't always do that. So in some cases, when we have had complaints, we will go and knock on the person's door and go check. That has happened. It doesn't happen a lot because we don't get a lot of complaints, but when we do find things like that, we will come and just make a knock on the door. They may not answer the door, but if they do, we will go in the backyard, if it's in the backyard or in the house or in the garage or wherever they're keeping individual dogs, cats.
Okay. Commissioner Herr?
They don't have to let you in under the current
That is correct.
ordinances. So you can go unannounced and knock on the door. They don't have to let you in, and you cannot revoke the kennel license.
Yeah.
It's announced.
Lockhart?
So, not to minimize the stress and anxiety of the original individual who brought this to our attention and the noise and everything, but you said we don't get very many complaints. How many complaints for this type of thing do we normally manage?
In a given year, 15 to 20.
That's a lot.
And how many of them are found to be like, yes, we have a problem here?
3 to 5.
Okay, so more complaints than actual violations.
Right.
Got it, okay. All right, I don't know, the foster thing is trouble, I don't know. I'm so torn, I really am.
I mean, is it
That's why
possible
I
to make
wanted more time.
some kind of exclusion for if you're like a legitimate foster or rescue like if you're affiliated with an actual rescue organization?
We can look at that and try and get better definitions.
Okay. All right. Anything else, Rebecca?
There's only a few in Seminole County, isn't there?
True.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
No, I'm talking about rescues.
Oh, no, there's a lot of rescues.
No.
I'd say anywhere from 40 to 50 rescues.
Actually actually
In the
registered?
county, in Seminole County.
Registered, okay.
A lot of animal lovers
Okay.
in this community.
Let's go to
It's good.
questions. Ms. Beach?
Joseph Humphreys.
Okay, Mr. Humphrey? When you do come to the podium, please give us your name and address, and at that point, the clock will start.
It's just going to have to be.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Joseph Humphreys, 883 Cardinal Point Cove, Sanford, Florida. If there's one thread that I've heard this morning is how hard this is. It's not easy. I heard a lot of good questions and comments from everybody, to staff, commission. I worked for an old Florida cracker when I first came to Florida. And he gave me a plaque on my first project. I said, it's hard to remember that you came to drain the swamp when you're up to your butt in alligators. And that's kind of where we are. I think the Commissioner Herr mentioned about the indiscretions of the past. Talking today about making changes to the LDC codes going forward, we can't rely on necessarily what the past brought us, because I think everybody would agree that there's probably a bunch of stuff we did that we would like to undo. Obviously, we can't go backwards, we can only go forwards. So one thing that, again, having been involved in this, and I just came back from Italy, and I had lots of interesting conversations with people about these same exact issues. The thing about in this county, and going through the codes multiple times, all land in this county has existing codes and zoning. It was done that way for a reason. So there are unique areas, as small as this county is, the urban core, Castleberry, Maitland, the attributes of those communities are a lot different than the Warp or where I live or the rural boundary. So I think to try to make decisions, as was said, one size fits all does not make sense. We need to treat the rural area, we need to treat the Warp different than we do the core. We've already made those decisions, I think, so we need to continue to stick with those for all of these issues. The complat states the county does not have an obligation to help a developer maximize its profits. When I buy a piece of property, I know what the zoning is. When I contract for a piece of property, I know what the zoning is. This board is not obligated to increase my ability to maximize profits on that piece of property. And I think that going forward is something that needs to remain a common. And also compatibility. The county codes talk about compatibility. I think staff may have had a visit with some communities that some of the commissioners have seen over the last several months that we would all agree were not compatible. You know, the International Drive area is a prime example of that. So we have to be very, very cautious and thoughtful, which is what I've heard today, and how we address some of these issues going forward. So I appreciate staff's efforts on these issues, and I appreciate the board's issues, and we look forward to working with you to come up with something that makes sense for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Humphrey.
Next, I have Michelle, but she did not put a last name. Michelle?
Is there Michelle in the audience that'd like to speak? Is there Michelle in the audience that'd like to speak? Okay.
Okay, so after that, I have Cindy Holler.
Okay. And can you give us your full name, please, and your address?
Michelle Dewey, Sir Lawrence Drive, 202 Sir Lawrence Drive, Sanford. I have multiple things I want to talk about, so I'll try to be fast. The wetlands buffer, I think all floodplains, all rivers, all wetlands, all ponds need a larger buffer. 15 to 25 feet is nothing. It doesn't protect any animals that are trying to nest there. It doesn't protect any animals at all. They all leave. You know, so, and then any pesticides that are put in, fertilizers, that poisons those areas as well. So 15 to 25 feet, that's nothing, absolutely nothing. I mean, you know, look here, what's 15 to 25 feet? My recommendation is at least 100 feet. I would like to see 100 yards, but I know you're not going to give me that or anybody that. So I just wanted to mention that. It needs to be more. If you want to protect the aquifer, you want to protect the wildlife, you want to protect people's health overall and the environment overall, biodiversity, and you know, all the above and more, you need to protect that more. It's really a necessity. So there's that. Let's see. Solar panels, actually, solar panels, you don't need to remove forest for solar panels. You all already talked about top of buildings, parking lots. How much city and county space is there on roofs that you can be putting that on, saving the county money? Or we have all those power lines. Why can't there be solar panels put through where there are power lines and collecting space and collecting solar for residential areas? There's so many places. Can you offer incentives for private businesses, for any kind of businesses, even in downtown Sanford? Why can't there be solar panels on top of those? I'm told that they are they can resist hurricane force winds now, and that there's a very minimum amount of maintenance required for them. So by the time you use them up, they've already paid for themselves, and if you have to start all over again, it's already paid for itself. So that's something to consider. So that's my take on solar farms. Affordable housing. Wherever you put affordable housing, there probably needs to be some good public transportation as well. So if you're considering putting it next to any light industrial, where the transportation going to be? Why does affordable housing need to be in places that may be considered unsightly, that may be exposing people to any kind of chemicals and things like that for their health? Why can't it be integrated? I know a lot of people say, well, I don't want it in my neighborhood because they're concerned about, you know, crime or something like that. But a lot of that is unfounded, and there's a lot of large homes that maybe are being sold, abandoned, people have passed away, whatever. Why can't some of those places be used? There's a place in downtown Sanford that's an old, huge building. I think they're refurbishing it, and there's a big plot of land around it as well. Why can't that be nice where people can start integrating, if they need to, into society or finding better lives? I'm not sure all the terminology for that. Open spaces. I don't think any wetlands, any of those areas waterways should be considered open spaces. I understand that you want them to be amenities. Why can't they be both? I don't understand why, but they absolutely need to be protected because any of the ponds are connected to aquifers. They can be polluted. We need the water. We need the water. Everybody needs the water. So it also affects the wildlife. We need to protect the wildlife. We need to protect the biodiversity because biodiversity takes care of the forests and the wetlands and the waters. We need that, so we help each other. They take care of they give us millions of dollars of savings, so we need to protect them. We also need to protect land for future use. Somebody mentioned we need a bigger convention center. We need hotels near the Sanford Airport, things like that. So and parking, and for other things that we just spoke of. So we need to be protecting that land. Are we protecting 30% of the land for climate change? What are we doing for wildlife corridors? So these are all questions I have, where all these things that you're talking about.
Michelle, your time is up. If you can just put that in writing for us, that'd be great.
Yeah, I think I've covered everything. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Cindy Holler, and our last speaker is WAFA.
Okay.
Commissioners, Cindy Holler, 1731 Beacon Drive. I will try to be snappy, but if I could have more minutes, I don't really want to take 6 based on the neighborhood watch program in my neighborhood.
Let's do the best we can.
Okay, all right. So first, Kane and Associates proposed in the spring of 2022 PDs to be a minimum of 15 acres, not 5 acres. I'm absolutely opposed to 5 acres. Okay in higher density urban core areas like 1792, and I'm sorry I missed the beginning of the discussion. Had some family issues, pet issues too. But definitely not in suburban rural agricultural areas. In my opinion, 5 acres is too small for mixed use, should be at least 10 acres. Wetlands, floodplains, retention ponds to count as open space, absolutely opposed to all of that. So I don't think it should. Opposed to wetlands mitigation, not an effective program. Let's see. Buffers and trees. So I concur with Michelle, no trees destroyed for solar farms. Trees, what do they do for us? Have we talked about this a lot? Lower temperatures, take carbon out of air, provide shade, provide animal homes. Definitely want bigger buffers to the Wekiva. 50 feet's too small, minimum 100 at least. So talked to a couple of county people about this before. I would like to request tree retention with retention ponds that are going to go in along Orange Boulevard with regard to the Orange Boulevard Improvement Project, as well as in future retention ponds throughout the county. Of course, natural wetlands, there's no maintenance issues, and they're the best retention ponds. Almost done, actually, so this is not too bad. So I do know about chickens. I've kept them before. Keep the backyard chicken program. It's affordable, healthy food. And I think that's about it regarding land development code. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Cindy. Next.
WAFA's next.
WAFA Esposito, 5040 Hawksham McQuaid. I think we have right now our so celebrated by us Natural Resources Officer. I'm really hoping they could be she could be having her input when it comes to the wetlands and the study you're going to be digging. Definitely more buffer. And I don't know how with Novel Parkway we ended up agreeing on the 30-foot and the developer walked away with not doing that. This idea of buying into a tree fund is like saying, okay, I can breathe here, but I can breathe there. It doesn't work like that. Where we live, we need to have the trees for a better quality of life. And when we talk about dense communities, that's more for them too, because by number, by ratio, they are entitled to that. Who's going to do that for them if we don't, as a collective, demand it from the developer and restrict the ratio of building to land so they can have air quality? A lot of people are working from home. It's the trend. The young generation are. This is not going backward, so at least let's have their living quarters and spaces are offering good quality of life. Solar, we spoke about 4 years ago when the first time Chase had the audacity to take away trees. I really hope this is not going to be a trend, because they did it only to satisfy their foot carbon so they can brag about it as a corporate. They never, as you said, none of these companies explored hard surfaces in their buildings to do it. Okay, because it's more expensive, but they can afford it. They write it off as a tax. Okay, if we don't expect it from those people, you cannot expect it from us. We residential are doing a great job doing that, but those people are not at all. Where I see a flaw here, that the permit for building buildings in the future has to be able to sustain solar panel, whether the current owner who's coming with a permit is going to install them or not. Because as Ms. Hur said, you are right, they're still not earth-friendly. They're not there yet, okay? But they will be. So if we allow permits that cannot sustain the weight of these panels, then we are, again, cutting the chances of those buildings to be able to sustain the weight of those panels. I think when it comes to Florida transportation, Department of Transportation, they widened 46, and they did a great walkways, but they really are not providing any kind of small shade trees. So how people are gonna walk in that area that has all the shopping and use that? I think they need to be a cooperation between Florida Department of Transportation and the county, where to demand from them to do that, because I've been calling them and I don't think they have that in plan for 46, for example. I think the tree policy or the tree amendment or whatever we call it, tree code, it should really encompass over the years such a perpetual tree planting, so we do not have gap. We have the centennials that are kept somewhere, but they are really not anywhere where we can in the future say that the future generation are going to be able to see a life cycle tree.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Dina Houston.
Deanna Houston, 750 Sagana Point, Lake Mary, Florida, 32746. I know I'm not technically in the county, but Lake Mary has made some big mistakes that I hope the Seminole County doesn't make. And I've seen you guys improve, or at least the words are improving about caring about the trees and the land more. I want to jump to Griffin Park was used as an example, and we hate Griffin Park. And they cut that huge oak tree down on the corner. No one sits out there. They put palm trees up. And Commissioner Hurd talked about the trees that have been hurt, and we know they actually do hurt trees on purpose. So I think we do need to put these guidelines in now to protect. And that may be one benefit of the recession, if it comes, when it comes, is that maybe builders won't be able to build. Maybe people will start being multi-generational. Maybe we'll start having ADUs, et cetera. So there can be a good thing, like it happened with the last recession. Living in Lake Mary, where Florida Hospital is now, Advent Health, that was a beautiful tree, and they were tree area, retention pond, and they were gonna build, I guess, stores, and now it's Advent Health. I've always been Florida Hospital. So, but I really think you guys are heading the right direction. There's more good questions being asked. We do need a 100-foot buffer, though, on the protected areas. We have the Crystal Lake Preserve right by my house. They were going to do a 50-foot burn preserve, but they took 10 of it away because so many of the houses in Timucuan had crept already, and they didn't want to give up. So the fence was 40 feet. So that creep happens, and if you have just 15, 25, even 50 feet, that's not that big. And people creep into those protected areas. Everybody said good things about solar. I now have solar panels, and I'm going to feel bad in 20 years if they end up in the garbage, because they are not great for the environment, but they do have their benefits. Also, chickens and animals with the economy the way it is, I agree with Cindy. We need to allow chickens because of food, just simple, for people to have food. Affordable housing, also, I agree with you, Commissioner Constantine. We need to give that a shot. Universal and Disney are also trying to, it's not completely the same as commercial industrial, but they recognize they need affordable housing. And if people maybe can work next to their jobs and live next to their jobs, how cool is that? Thank you.
Thank you.
No more speakers.
Any other speakers that'd like to address the board at this time before we close it? We're closing public input. Commissioner Lockhart?
I just want to make sure we're clear. We're not eliminating the backyard chicken program. We're making it something that is allowable, but you will not have to go through a permit process in order to have chickens anymore. There will still be a program involved. There will still be all sorts of opportunities. I heard it a couple times, and I thought, oh, we better clarify.
No, we know. We just want to make sure you know we like it.
Got it. Wonderful.
Ms. Rebecca, you believe you have direction?
Yes, thank you very much. I
Any
really
closing
appreciate it.
comments?
I just want to concur with Commissioner Lockhart. You know, when we're getting the folks coming up here, I know you've heard the presentations. So, yeah, we all love trees. Yeah, we all want, wetlands, buffers. Yes, we all want affordable housing. The point is, we were talking about, like we said, degrees and finding the sweet spot. And that's what we really should be talking about when you all come up, because we need your input. But to say, oh, we all love trees, or to say we all want, setbacks, or to say, we all want wetlands, I mean, we all agree. Or the chickens, we all agree. But we really need input on specifics. So, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Applegate, anything else?
Just a couple of things, Mr. Chairman, real quick. I want to report that on the Rosenwall project, we've established a core team with staff. Steve Fussell will be the project manager. I want to thank Rebecca and Mary. They're already way ahead of us on notice to the citizens, and we're going to obviously manage the expectations. That's a top priority. Second thing, on the county manager search, we've identified 27 national firms. Diane Reese is going, we'll be contacting each and every one of those. We will send proposals to each and every one. And then finally, on behalf of all the employees, I want to thank all of you for your actions last week on the compensation study and the 4%. I can tell you that all Mill Nutrition and I are getting tremendous comments from staff, and I know you've received some as well, so thank you very much.
Mr. Chipok, any comments?
Thank you. Yes, I have two comments this morning. First, I'd just like to place on the record that we did have a labor negotiations shade meeting this morning to discuss the firefighters Unit B contract proposal, and at that meeting in attendance were Tricia Johnson, Brian Applegate, myself, Chief Kinley, and Commissioners Delary, Herr, Constantine, and Lockhart. And that matter will be coming back before this full board in a public hearing setting for voting on the contract at some point in the future. The second is in dealing with the ARPA contracts and the municipalities, there was a bit of a hiccup in that the funding for certain countywide programs, we had interlocal agreements with the municipalities, and the request was for the county to agree to include language in the agreements between the county and nonprofits that the nonprofits would use competitive procurement requirements for purchase of goods and services as required in each respective agreement. That was generally agreed to. However, that particular requirement did not get into 17 nonprofit agreements that have been executed. So we are going to amend those 17 agreements, and we're looking for authorization to the county manager or interim county manager to sign those amended agreements on your behalf for that limited purpose.
So moved.
Second. Is there a second?
Second.
Oh, I'm sorry. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion passes.
Thank you. I have nothing else to
Quickly.
report at this time.
Just a question.
Commissioner Herr?
Somebody's probably going to have to help those nonprofits with understanding what that all means.
Yes, understood.
We'll stand on recess till 1:30.